Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Our guests are Apuzzo and Adam Goldman, reporters for the Associated Press, co-authors of the brand new book, Enemies Within, Inside the NYPD Secret Spying Unit and bin Laden's Final Plot Against America. We are also joined by Linda Sarsour. She is here in New York City, leading Arab American activist with the Arab American Association of New York and National Network for Arab American Communities. I'm Amy Goodman with Aaron Maté.
Well, before break, we're talking about Larry Sanchez, who came to the NYPD from the CIA. And let's turn to part of a 2007 hearing before the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs that looked at the NYPD's counterterrorism efforts. This is then Senator Joe Lieberman questioning New York City Assistant Police Commissioner Larry Sanchez, the analyst who came to the NYPD from the CIA.
I'm paraphrasing, but I think you said that the aim of this investigation and of the NYPD was not just to prevent terrorist attacks, obviously, post 9/11 in New York City, but to try to prevent, understand, and then prevent the radicalization that leads to terrorist attacks. So in the end of it, what are the steps that you come away with that you feel in this very unusual area, unremarkable people, not on the screen of law enforcement? How do you begin to try to prevent the radicalization that leads to terrorism?
Let me try to answer it this way. The key to it was first to understand it, and to start appreciating what most people would say would be non-criminal, would be innocuous, looking at behaviors that could easily be argued in a Western democracy, especially in the United States, to be protected by First and Fourth Amendment rights, but not to look at them in a vacuum, but to look across to them as potential precursors to terrorism. New York City, of course, has created its own methods to be able to understand them better, to be able to identify them, and to be able to make judgment calls if these are things that we need to worry about.
That's Larry Sanchez testifying in 2007. Apuzzo.
You know, one of Adam and I have watched that clip and read that transcript, I don't know, dozens of times. And one of our great regrets is that this happened in 2007 and nobody, and including us, said, hey, that guy just got up and said stuff that's protected by the First Amendment shouldn't be viewed as such and should be viewed as a potential precursor to terrorism, and that the NYPD has these sort of unspecified methods to decide how to ferret that out. I kind of watch that now, and I remember when that happened, and now I'm kind of like, how the heck did I not, you know, how did the reporter in me not say, geez, well, what are these methods? Why the heck did it take 4 years before, you know, Adam and I look back now and we're like, geez, they told us they were doing this stuff. They told us, you know, they laid it all out there, and you know, why weren't we as journalists, as a public, more skeptical, and why weren't we willing to ask more questions?
The FBI, Adam Goldman, and the NYPD were also competing with each other, so much so that they were going to sue each other. Can you explain what was happening?
Well, there was enormous friction between the FBI and NYPD, mainly the NYPD Intelligence Division. And these two outfits would sometimes not work in harmony, mainly because Dave Cohen thought that the Intelligence Division and his detectives should go on their own. He didn't want to be part of what they called groupthink. So they said, look, we'll go out and we're going to investigate. If we find something, we'll bring it to you. But the problem with doing is that sometimes these investigations were at late stages, and the FBI had concerns about what how they had developed these cases. And it flared up in the newspaper, and you know, in the end, the FBI felt like, look, you just can't go out and do your own thing. If we're going to stop this, we got to work as a team, and that's how you build cooperation. How you build stronger cases.
Matt, and then the spying, of course, also extended beyond the Muslim community. There's reports in your book about spying on left-wing activists, on bicycle protests.
Yeah, so everybody remembers the bombing of the Times Square recruiting station, the pipe bomb. It thankfully didn't injure anybody, but it was 3 in the morning and it blew out a window. Well, in the aftermath of that, the NYPD, and we've seen this in the files, the NYPD did an investigation where they said, we've identified this blog that posts links to protests, news stories about protests and pictures of protests all around the world, confrontations, anarchist protests, radical protests, people throwing Molotov cocktails. That's what this blog does. And they said, boy, that blog had a link up to a Fox News story about the Times Square bombing within 3 hours. And to the NYPD, the 3 hours seemed awfully quick. And so they said, well, maybe that suggests that the guy who runs the blog knew in advance. And it turns out that at one point, years earlier, one of the guys who ran the blog, this guy named Dennis Burke, he had ties to Critical Mass, the guys who ride the bikes, and Time's Up New York, the protest group in New York City. And
Friends of Brad
and
Will.
Friends of Brad Will, the group that wants to get to the bottom of the death of an American journalist in Mexico. So they actually opened an investigation based on those facts. They opened an investigation not only into Burke, but also into his associates in these other groups. And so they infiltrated the Time's Up guys, the Critical Mass guys, the Friends of Brad Will. They actually sent an undercover officer as part of this investigation out to the People's Summit in New Orleans, which is this group of sort of anti-globalization groups, and the NYPD was there, and because of this investigation into the bombing, they actually put into files people who were labor organizing for nannies, people who were talking about the Palestinian conflict with the Israelis, people who were writing newsletters from sort of left-wing organizations, stuff who had no connection. Nobody believed there was any connection to the bombing, but it just shows you how this stuff sort of spirals away from its central focus.
Linda Sarsour, can you talk about, as you're with the Arab American Association of New York, how the investigations that the NYPD was conducting, that Adam and Matt are describing, affected you and your community?
So Adam and Matt basically confirmed everything that our community already knew was happening, at least since immediately after 9/11. And the terrorist enterprise investigations that you heard also included, I believe, my organization. And what the NYPD wanted to do to my organization, and they clearly laid this out in a secret document, is they wanted to recruit a confidential informant to sit on my board. So not only were they creating listening posts and going into our restaurants, coming to our events, acting as clients in our organizations, they wanted to actually have someone who would be a deciding figure on my board. They'd have access to donors, access to information, access to financial information. And I think that we keep learning that the program is just more outrageous. And what it does is it creates psychological warfare in our community. How am I supposed to know if the NYPD was successful in that endeavor? That's number one. Number two is the community right now is in a position where, how do we even know the guy next to us that's praying at the mosque, or the guy at the restaurant that's like trying to open a conversation with us about something that's happening in Egypt, for example? And for those people who know Arabs particularly, we love to talk about politics, and a lot of us and a lot of our families came to the United States so we can have a place to practice our religion freely, to have our own political views. And now that we know that the NYPD wants to hear what our sentiment is, people probably don't want to share their sentiment. And the most disturbing of all is our Muslim student associations, who are calling us to consult about how political should their events be. Now, when I was in college, I wanted my events to be as political as possible, and if they weren't, I wanted to figure out how to make them controversial. And the fact that our students feel like they can't do that because there are going to be NYPD informants, because they can be taken out of context, and because they think something like what happened to Fahad Hashmi is going to happen to them, I think is a valid concern for them to have. So I'm a New Yorker, and I hope other New Yorkers are outraged to know that the New York Police Department is spying on innocent Americans in their neighborhood. And the last point I want to make is that these terrorist investigations, what happens is that if they open one, anyone who comes into that facility that's under investigation is subject to that investigation. So if my organization has this terrorist enterprise investigation, that means every client, every staff member, every family member, every vendor that we work with is subject to this investigation by the New York Police Department.
Tell us about the NYPD Soccer League.
a program that the NYPD touts as a community outreach program, and something that we believed as a community we were involved in because we wanted to get kids off the street, wanted kids to play sports, and it was organized sports competition between kids from different boroughs. I mean, it was fun. We joined as the Arab American Association of New York. We had a team, Brooklyn United. In 2009, we beat the Turks from Queens, and it was great, and it was fun, and we have a huge trophy from the New York Police Department. What we learned later through secret documents is that the New York Police Department was using a sports league. Now imagine that your child is part of this league and is being spied on by the New York Police Department. And what the New York Police Department did is they actually mapped out for you 2 different documents. One was, where do the South Asians play cricket and watch cricket, and where do the Arabs play soccer and watch soccer? For those of you that know soccer, Arabs are not the only ones that play soccer. Definitely not in New York City anyway. So I feel that the information just gets more outrageous, that, you know, even something as simple as sports, as playing soccer, is something that's under the terrain of the New York Police Department, that our kids were subject to intelligence gathering and spying by the New York Police Department when all they wanted to do was beat some people or some other kids in another borough. And I think our kids right now are like, you know, their families are like, what's this? And you know, how am I supposed to explain to them that I didn't know, that I was not, you know, had no intention of subjecting their children to intelligence gathering by the New York Police Department. So I personally get put in a situation that Commissioner Kelly and his people put us in, and actually the Arab officers who work in the Community Affairs Department. I don't know if they knew, but if they did know, shame on them for allowing us to be a part of something where they knew had other ulterior motives.
Now, Linda, here in New York, there's obviously a lot of public protest against stop and frisk. How has it been to organize resistance to this spying on your community? What are you finding in terms of the public's reception to this program?
You know, in New York right now, and I think in the country as a whole, I think you'll find it's more likely for people to say, oh, stopping 685,000 blacks and Latino young people, that's a little racist. You know, that's kind of a little too much. And I think we're finding more people, and I'm part of the stop and frisk movement as a person who's not black or Latino. So I've seen that sentiment. But with the spying, it's been hard to get people to understand that it's the same thing. They're both discriminatory policies that target communities of color, no matter what way somebody tries to explain it to me. The problem with our movement is that it's framed in this sense of personal security. So people are like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, what's the problem? What's this inconvenience of some guy that listens to like your conversations? And I think that's where the fundamental principles of who we are as Americans and what our rights are, right to privacy. Like I shouldn't have to worry about working in an organization that's infiltrated by the New York Police Department. I hope no one else has to worry about that. But it's been a little difficult for us to organize around this, but continue to do so.
Speaking to MSNBC last month, New York Police Commissioner Ray Kelly responded to the report by our guests, Matt Apuzzo and Adam Goldman, that the NYPD has labeled mosques as terrorist organizations. Kelly insisted the NYPD's operations are legal.
I haven't seen the story, but they're hyping a book that's coming out next week. Actually, the book is based on a compilation of about 50 articles that 2 AP reporters did on the department. If it's a reflection of the articles, then the book will be a fair amount of fiction. It'll be half-truths. It'll be lots of quotes from unnamed sources. And our sin is to have the temerity, the chutzpah, to go into the federal government's territory of counterterrorism and trying to protect this city by supplementing what the federal government has done.
You do agree that entire mosques should not be labeled terrorist organizations,
absolutely,
right?
Of course. And again, we do according to the law. What we're investigating and how we investigate it is done pursuant to a federal judge's direction.
That's New York Police Commissioner Ray Kelly, who is reportedly one of the people being considered to head the Department of Homeland Security. Adam Goldman, there was a lot there, accusations that your reports are fiction and based on unnamed sources. Go ahead. Well,
one of the things we tried to do with this book that the NYPD doesn't do is we tried to be incredibly transparent. If Ray Kelly gets the chance, can read the book, he'll find that many people spoke on the record about what the NYPD was doing, and named individuals, including the Hector Padilla, who ran the demographics unit. Another thing we tried to do was endnote all the secret documents that were leaked to us. So the reader themselves can go and look at the endnote and then go to our website, enemieswithinbook.com, and read the secret files themselves. and come to their own conclusions. So we lay all that out, and in an effort to be completely transparent. The book is, as the Wall Street Journal said, assiduously reported. The other point I'd like to make about Ray's comments is that he won't engage with us on the book, and he's never engaged with us in either on the book or reporting. And Matt and I went to great lengths in the book to make a good case for why the NYPD felt like they needed these programs in the aftermath of 9/11.
Talk about the head of the demographics unit, who then came to be completely disturbed about what his unit was doing.
Yeah, he was a guy. He was a legendary narcotics detective. I mean, he was taking down drug dealers, taking guns off the streets. He was also a military reservist. And
his name?
Hector Padilla. And after 9/11, he spent time in Iraq, and he was there post-invasion, and he came back to New York, and they offered him this job to run this secretive unit that he was unfamiliar with, and he took this job, and he felt that, hey, there are bad guys in New York. There are bad guys in New York. There's Al-Qaeda in New York. And he believed it, as he himself had said, and he sort of drank the Kool-Aid. And as he went on running this unit, he began to get frustrated, and he began to see that, he had really talented detectives, right, with really great language skills, right? And they weren't making any cases, Was this an effective way? It's more about effectiveness. Is this an effective way to use resources of talented police investigators? These were guys who were used to putting bad guys in jail, right? Taking drugs off the streets, taking guns off the streets. I mean, guns kill people, okay? And he instead was, writing intelligence reports about, what people think of the State of the Union address, and eventually I think he got frustrated and disillusioned with the program. And
Matt, can you talk about the issue of oversight? First of all, I mean, this raises a lot of civil rights issues. Has there been a response from the White House or from the Justice Department? And also, and then talk about what kind of oversight exists here in the city.
Right, and what is this happening now?
Yeah, everything that we talk about in the book, with the exception of a few sort of ancillary programs, but the core of the book is, to our knowledge, is still happening now. Fascinating in the issue of oversight. The NYPD gets money from the City Council every year, obviously. The City Council never held a hearing to actually look into the Intelligence Division's programs. They've never been subjected to an audit. The Intelligence Division gets money from the White House under a drug trafficking grant. The White House says we don't know what the money's used for. You can't hold us to account for what the NYPD does with our money. Congress has funded these programs. They don't know. They're not equipped to know. They don't ask. Homeland Security and the Department of Justice have spent, $1 billion, $2 billion at the NYPD since 9/11. They say they don't know what goes on, and the way the grants are set up, they don't have the ability to know. There is essentially no outside oversight at the NYPD Intelligence Division. The programs are opened in-house. They don't have to be approved by a judge. They don't have to be approved by a prosecutor. Kelly likes to talk about how, we have all the federal prosecutors and the district attorney, but they don't actually decide when the Intel Division can open a case. So there isn't the kind of outside review that you would see at the CIA or at the FBI. And you know what? From our standpoint, the lack of transparency, the fact that this is all done in secret with no public airing, was really what drove us to write this book, because people can't give their informed consent to a program that they don't know exists. They don't know what they're giving up, but they don't know what they're getting in exchange.
Very quickly, as we come to the end of this conversation, Najibullah Zazi, of course, a key figure in your book.
Yeah. The book, in its essence, is a thriller book. I mean, it's a chase. This is essentially 48 hours inside New York City as the entire intelligence apparatus of the United States tries to unravel the most serious al-Qaeda plot since 9/11. Inside the United States, 3 young men led by Najibullah Azazi, these guys from New York, with a bomb, bearing down on the New York City subways. I mean, had this been successful, this would have caused, hundreds, if not thousands, of fatalities. And we take a real hard look, real critical look, or we think a real thorough look at what works and what doesn't. And what we found is that every opportunity that Zazi interacts with these intelligence programs, of the NYPD intelligence division, the PD misses him.
They were in his neighborhood.
They were in his neighborhood. They were in his mosque. They had turned his imam into a cooperative. They had an undercover in his mosque. They were in his co-conspirator student group. They were in all the restaurants in his neighborhood. They were in the travel agency where he bought tickets to go to Pakistan to train. This was not a failure of, resources and manpower.
So what happened?
Well, they missed him. We have to read the book to find out how they stop him. Come on. But the subways don't blow up. So the real rush is, good collaboration, good cooperation is what saves the day.
And Adam, what most surprised you in doing the series of articles? You did scores of articles, and of course the book is more than the compilation of the articles.
Yeah, I think what most surprised us is while we were doing the series that led to the Pulitzer, we knew they were in the mosques, and we knew they were they had informants in the mosque, they had undercovers in the mosque. And Ray had said, well, we're just following leads, and this is all legal. That's been Ray's, that's phrase, right? It's all legal. And we didn't really understand, well, how is this all legal? How can you just be in a mosque?
People might be surprised even that the CIA is involved with local surveillance.
Right, right. And then while we were reporting out the book, we obtained documents that showed, well, this is how they are doing it. We learned about the Terrorism Enterprise Investigation. And so now, holistically, we understood, oh, right, well, so they opened this investigation on sometimes reed-thin suspicions, and they used that to gather intelligence on these mosques, the leadership of the mosques, for years and years and years and years and years. They never made a terrorism enterprise case. And by designating the mosque a terrorism enterprise, they could send in their informants and undercovers. They send in people with spy gadgets, listening devices in their watches and their key fobs, and that was really extraordinary. I want to make a point, one last point about Ray and why we wrote Ray Kelly, right, the commissioner, and why we wrote this book. We're not questioning Ray Kelly's patriotism, and we're not questioning his authority as police chief to keep this city better. I guess what we're doing is, and maybe to use one of Ray's words, it's chutzpah. I guess we have the chutzpah to ask questions about what the police department's doing and whether these tactics work.
We're going to leave it there, but we will continue to talk to you as you continue to uncover what is taking place. I want to thank you both for being with us, and congratulations on your Pulitzer for your series of articles. The new book is Enemies Within, inside the NYPD secret spying unit and bin Laden's final plot against America. Matt Apuzzo and Adam Goldman. And thank you so much, Linda Sarsour, Arab American Association of New York, and the National Network for Arab American Communities. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report.